In this video, I'm going to be sharing my recipe for success for how I go about reporting in my homeschool, and then how I loosely plan curriculum in our homeschool that flexibly fits in with our homeschooling lifestyle, and then how it's all connected and in line with our vision and our goals for our homeschool. Whoa, this is going to be a big one, guys. Grab a coffee and join me for the video. For those that are new here, welcome. My name is Tiffany. This is Hint to Life Homeschool, and thanks for joining me. I am a homeschool mum of 2 children. I live in Queensland, Australia, and we have a very relaxed homeschooling lifestyle, which we have completely, cultivated and created over the last 4 years of homeschooling. Okay, so let's just talk about reporting for a minute here. To give you some context, reporting can also be classed as under portfolio or end of year summary. It is different for everybody because simply there are just different rules and regulations to follow in different areas, different countries, all of the above. So basically I am in Australia, Queensland, and we have a fairly strict, some regard it as being strict, guidelines to follow within our home education departments. For me, I report on both of my children each year, and it is due on the same time every year. So every 10 months, I have to start gathering my samples of work, which is 6 samples per child, 3 at the beginning of the year and then 3 at the end. So it covers English and maths and then a subject of our choice. And it can't be the same subject every year, the subject of choice. It has to be, constantly evolving and changing, and a good variety of samples to showcase a good high education. So I have a few issues around reporting and the government guidelines, and I think everybody does. But at the end of the day, it could be worse. I mean, there are some countries that it is completely illegal to homeschool. So I'm not going to get into that. I'm grateful to be able to homeschool my kids, and I'm happy to provide samples of work. I'm really incredibly proud of the work that we achieve each year, and they blow me away. And I think that sometimes we have to get creative in order to follow the guidelines and the rules and make them work as best as possible to suit our family. And sometimes that can be really hard, and I get that. But if we kind of just start feeling resentful towards that time of year and create, that stress around it, it makes it even harder for ourselves. So it's just something that we have to do. It is better than, as far as I'm concerned, it's better than sending my children to school and having them subjected to that kind of thinking and that kind of environment every single day. So for me, this is a compromise, and I'm happy to do it for that reason. So I guess my bit of advice would be to try and digest that information that you need to actually do, and work it in a way that it sits okay with you and you feel okay with it. And I've done that myself. I've worked through that. I used to really resent it. I used to get myself really sick over it as well, because the way we homeschool is very different to the way they structure the questions and they structure the plan, and it's very rigid and it seems black and white. But life is not like that, and homeschooling is not like that for us. Throughout this video, I'm going to show you my kind of recipe that I've created that supports the way I do samples and the way that I, showcase my children's work. I'm showing you and I'm sharing that with you, but please remember, this is my version and it will look different for you. but I want to share as much as I possibly can because I understand that this is really stressful. It is through creativity and it is through really planning out what samples I'm going to have that I have success. So that's why I decided to create this video in line with our goals and in line with our vision, because everything is connected for me. Like, it all needs to tell a story. That is how it makes sense for me. I mean, everyone's different, but this is my video, so this is what I'm sharing. So when I'm planning samples for my kids, I get creative. Like, I know that a lot of young kids hate writing, and that was probably one of the biggest challenges that I had first starting out with my son, who was in grade 2, and we pulled him out of school, and like, we had to do a whole big couple of months of deschooling, and we had huge trauma that he had to work through, and I'm sure I'll do a video about that. I'll link a blog post that I created that I wrote for Freely Homeschool Planner around our experience with homeschooling, if you'd like to have a little read of it. It tells more of the background of the trauma and what we went through, just to give it context. So my advice for parents that are maybe new to homeschooling and they're facing their first report, or they're preparing or want to know what that reporting world looks like. For me, and for the reporting that I do, I am very open and honest about whether my children like doing the work. So, for example, my son still doesn't like writing. It's just never going to be his thing, but he loves drawing. So, you know, it's fascinating stuff. However, I have found that the reason why he doesn't like writing, and this is just pure from observation over the last couple of years, and it takes time to put all the pieces together, but I've figured out that he doesn't like writing because he can't focus on what he's trying to write and actually write it at the same time. So we've started recording him, so he will play out and even reenact a story for me and put it into his own words. We'll record it, and then he can sit there and he plays it back to himself, so he can just focus on writing the words out, listening to his own voice and relaying that story back to him through the recording. That works amazingly for him, and we have just, once we figured that out, we just went through the roof with writing, and he's okay with it now. He still doesn't like it, but he knows that it's part of, you know, what we need to do, because I only ever give him writing activities when it's purposeful, when it's a project that we're working on and it's in his interests and it's part of something that we've worked on together. We decided that's going to be our writing for the year. That's going to be our writing project for this term. And that's going to be the project that I'm going to send away to the government for homeschooling. So he's cool with it. He understands, because I've worked to build that trust with him. And I've said, look, I know you don't like writing. I know it feels uncomfortable, and I don't want you doing something that is uncomfortable. Let's work together on this and figure out a plan. And I think if you build trust, in my experience, building trust with your kids is probably the most important thing. So if they don't like a particular subject or a particular thing, investigate it. Investigate why. And they can't often voice why, because they don't know. So it takes time, and it takes investigation and observation through that. Make notes. Make notes when it went really well too, not just when it went badly. And then that way you can figure out what you need to do more of and what you can do less of. So that's in regards to reporting and trying to create samples of work in subjects or you know, tasks that your kids don't usually like. We can't get around writing. We all have to do writing. Some like it more than others, and that's how we do it. It works really, really well. So recently we did a project around Australia's history, And I learned so much from this as well. And we worked on this together, Isaac and I. So we investigated things. He had questions and I helped him find the right websites to do that investigation with. We had a small unit study that we purchased from a company called RigiDig curriculum, I think it's called. I'll link it below. It was specific to grade 5 work, I think, because she follows the Australian curriculum, because she provides a lot of curriculum work for teachers, and she provides a discount for home educators if you apply. So there's a section on her website that you can apply for a discount. I think it's 50% off. It is great value and it's great for sample works as well. My son really likes them because he doesn't like writing, and the project that I purchased was a lap book. Now that worked really well for him because it's just like a 10-minute writing task, but it builds up into this project, into this huge amount of work, a huge amount of writing, very impressive. And he goes investigating, and he loves report work. So, I mean, he loves to investigate, find information, find answers, and he's in his happy place. So writing that down wasn't that big of a deal for him. So we filled out that, or he filled out that project, all the information around it. And then in the center of the lap book, there was a kind of like a journal, and he had to pretend that he was one of the characters from back then. So we researched, and he decided he wanted to be a convict, and he was 8 years old, because we found out that there were actually, in fact, some children that had broken the law, stealing food, bits and pieces, and were on the ships to Australia. He was able to look at all the information around the outside of the journal in the lap book to give him the ideas of what he needed to use to describe what he saw, to describe what it was like on the ship, down to the tools and things that he would do for work, and the clothing that he would wear and everything. So he was able to find all that information because it was right there, and he'd already researched it, and he'd already had it all written out for him. So that is setting him up for success. And also he was able to not rely on me for too much. He felt really independent with that project, which just boosted his confidence in writing as well. So I think that things like that are really helpful, and that's going to look different for every child. But finding something that works, that helps set them up to boost that confidence, to provide those amazing samples, is always a winner for me. When we're talking about samples, the mistake that I made was I thought that a sample had to be one lesson, and it had to be like sit down, start to finish, a piece of work that my child had done. So I have since found out that that is not the case, and it can be worked on for a couple of days or even a couple of weeks. It can be a project that you've gradually worked on and built on, and that is provided as your first sample, and then you can do another one at the end of the year. So keep your mind open, because I think we make some assumptions that make things even harder for ourselves when it comes to these kinds of things. And I think it's probably based on fear, and it's probably because the way that these authorities word things are so matter of fact that it's pretty easy to just make assumptions on those things because it's just so black and white. And don't be afraid to call if you need more information. I know that sometimes they are hard to get through to, and it is hard to get an answer as well sometimes too. Or even asking a question can make you feel like, are they gonna investigate me because I don't seem like I'm confident in doing this thing? But if you're not confident in contacting them directly, I really highly recommend you reaching out to a Facebook group in your local area that is specific to supporting home educators in reporting and just in general home education. So I have one that I am a part of for Queensland, and there are quite a few out there. So hopefully you've got one in your area. do some investigation on Facebook and see if you can find out. Ask some questions in some groups that you're probably already a part of and they will know of something. But if there isn't one, consider creating one, like with a couple of other home educators, and work together to create that community where you can share samples of work that you've submitted that were approved. I'm really grateful for the one that I'm a part of. I learned a lot, and I probably wouldn't be here sitting talking to you about what I know about reporting without that Facebook group. So all that said, I personally get overwhelmed by all the annotations and the information that I have to provide. There are feels like a gazillion questions that they have, and they're really quite direct, and it's really hard to just give a simple answer for, and usually it ends up being, a couple of paragraphs of, and that's what they want really, of explanation as to, what that answer is. But it's time consuming, and it's really hard towards the end of the year, you're tired and you're facing a bit of burnout, and it's a really tricky time of year to be able to think clearly about homeschooling sometimes, or it's hard to remember relevant information around that project, and it's just stressful enough, filling in that information or being subjected to this reporting process and trying to remember all these details of things. So I know that you probably, make some notes and bits and pieces or something. I used to write them on the back of the projects, but then I found that it just wasn't working. It failed me hugely one year, and I decided, okay, that's not the way we're going. Hence the reason why I created Freely. But now that I use Freely, I found it a hell of a lot easier to organize my reporting. There will be a way that works for you as well to create that process of organizing your reporting information so that you're not doing it all at the end of the year. That's the main point. So what I actually do and what I find most successful is at the beginning of the year, I plan out the 3 samples that I'm going to provide. So we've already had our goal, our vision meeting. We've already planned our goals. The next thing that I like to do is plan out what samples I'm going to provide. 3 for my son and 3 for my daughter. What are they? So what subject are they? That's the first thing. I have to decide on the subjects. So obviously it's English and maths. Those subjects are mandatory. But the other subject, is it going to be art? Is it going to be science? It could be history. What is it going to be? So I've decided for my son, let's just talk about my son just to cut down on time. For my son, we're doing English, maths, and art. He loves art, so this works really, really well. And we haven't reported on art. So I've always been doing, I think I did science and then I did history. So we're doing art, and that's going to be a really great one. So that's not going to be just throwing out a piece of artwork that he's done. We're going to do a project on the color wheel, understanding cool tones and warm tones, and that is the sample that I'm going to provide for the first half of the year. The maths sample for this year it's going to be around money. It's a Christmas in a box, and it's going to be sent to someone in need at Christmas time through a church. So it's a donation. So it's what can, love inside of a box. How much love can you fit in a box? And it's basically you work out your budget, and it talks about money fractions and all, it has like a whole heap of other little worksheets and bits and pieces. So we've got our box. We haven't purchased everything yet. We're going to purchase it towards the end of the year, but he's already written out his list, and he's factored in what budget he's going to have. And I think it was $50 that we had that we're going to spend, and he gets to choose what age group he wants, and he's filled that in already and planned out what would be suitable for that age group. We have some rules that we have to follow where we can't give away particular items, but other than that, he was able to pick what he wanted to give and what he wanted to donate. And so he really enjoyed that. It was a really great way for him to understand money and understanding budgeting, and he's really enjoying it. So the end sample I was thinking would work quite well. Simply Charlotte Mason is the curriculum for that, so we're going to be looking at doing that. So I set myself up for success by roughly planning what I'm going to report on, and I put this into Freely. So you could do this by writing a list or whatever works for you, but for me, I like everything in one place, along with all the photos, so I can just print to PDF and send it off, easy peasy. It's just something that is out of my head and it's done and it feels complete. So when it comes around to that actual time, I feel like all I have to do is just kind of PDF it and send it off. So that's really reassuring for me. And I really go in depth in my observations, and I try to give way more detail than I probably need to, just to cover all my bases, and I can really remember what had happened that day that we did that work. So once we have completed a sample of work, I tell the story of the experience right down to the comments made, good or bad. I don't leave anything out. I tell the story of what, you know, my son said, what I said, what he knew prior to the lesson, and what he knows now, and what comments that he had on what he thinks about what he had learned, what he was surprised to know, and so on and so on. I take photos of the work before, during, and after, and I automatically just attach them in, and then they're there and they're done and they're ready to go. Okay, so we've chatted a little bit about reporting and my thoughts on reporting, and kind of my best practices in the way I sort out, you know, first and foremost, what I'm, you know, needing to have to do, what I am obligated to provide to authorities in order to be able to keep my home education license. That's basically what it comes down to. To legally be able to continue homeschooling, I have to do X, Y, Z, and I do that my way. And I've found it the best way to not have to compromise on my beliefs and my not compromising and not making homeschooling stressful, because I'm stressed about, you know, what sort of you know, quality of work my children are providing that I'm going to be sending off. It makes me feel like I can just sit back and I can let them do their work and be proud of their work and allow them to be proud of their work, instead of me going, oh no, you should have done this, oh no, you should have done that. Or I couldn't even imagine doing that. That would be horrible. And I don't want people to think that that's what, you know, providing samples entails. That's not the picture that you have to paint for yourself. You can do it your way.